Ballet isn't the first art form that comes to mind to tackle harrowing contemporary stories, but that is what the Royal Winnipeg Ballet has done, transforming stories from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearing into motion and sound. It's called Going Home Star, Truth and Reconciliation. Tina Keeper is an associate producer of the production and a former member of Parliament, and she joins us now for more. And it's so good to finally have you in this studio.
Thank you.
We've never met before.
No, it's great
ridiculous.
to be here.
Yes, I'm glad we're finally doing this. Shall we see a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yes.
Sheldon, if you would, let's roll it. Okay, what drew you to this?
It was a project that was came from the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. It was their desire to do a project with an Aboriginal theme. They had done The Ecstasy of Rita Joe. It had been very successful for the company, but they had wanted to do a new creation. And so it is part of how the RWB works. They do new creations every couple of years. And this was one that they wanted to approach, I think in the sense that that this was representative of their country, and a new work should be part of who we are as a country. So they wanted to explore it.
And what story were you trying to tell in it?
Originally, it came from our artistic director, Andre Lewis, who had formed a friendship with an elder. She was an Ojibwe elder who had a season pass to the ballet, and she had asked him to explore Aboriginal culture through a new work, and so he always had that in his heart and in his mind. And this opportunity came to just one day to have a discussion. I had met their chair, and we started discussing the idea.
You've got it set in modern times, don't you?
And we do.
How come?
It was based on a partnership, what eventually became a partnership with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so we wanted to look at how the story of truth and reconciliation is contemporary, and then does have, as ballet does, in its beautiful storytelling modes, the ability to take us through different realities and different time periods. And so we really did that. We started with a contemporary story, and then our characters take us through the past and through dreams.
It's called Going Home Star. What does that mean?
Going Home Star is really the theme that came out of the research. So our choreographer, Mark Godden, had worked for about 2 years exploring our relationship with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and found through many of the interviews and attending the national events that the theme that most often was heard was that students, survivors, had wanted to go home. And so really in terms of then creating the piece, with these, based on the story that Joseph Boyden gave us, Mark did additional research on Indigenous astronomy and some of the mythology. And really, these star people came to represent the family that our characters had left back home.
Gotcha.
So it was it's a very layered type of piece, but Going Home Star is really a tribute to the survivors.
Do you recall, when did you see it for the first time on the stage?
Well, I saw it at the dress rehearsal, but I'd been in the rehearsal period throughout the whole creation process. Seeing it on the stage was just so spectacular, and I think that we always felt that we weren't sure about whether we had actually honored the stories of the survivors. And that was a very, very, that was one of the elements that we had kept at the core of the project.
I want to pick up on that word spectacular, though. You said it was
Yes, it was spectacular.
You said it was spectacular seeing it happening on the stage.
Yes.
What made it so?
The design, our designer was Casey Adams, and she's an Ojibwe woman from Manitoba. She worked with a costume designer, Paul Daigle, who often works with Mark Godden. And so our design, so the set design, the lighting design, We also have a bit of AV work on it. And, and the dancers were just beautiful, and the costumes were beautiful. And
Did you have a hand in all of that?
I worked with Andre and Jeff Hurd, our executive director. We worked with Mark in terms of putting together the team. So our Mark had decided to work with Christos Hassis as his composer, and then we as a team then looked at who would be our collaborators.
And how'd you get Joseph Boyden in there?
Yeah, so initially when the discussion happened with Mark Godden, I had suggested we needed to bring somebody on who could work with Mark and perhaps write the story. And so I reached out to Joseph Boyden, gave him a call, and he agreed. And I think from that moment, we just knew that we really had something special, that people felt that they could find a story that would work for ballet, that we were in a process of reconciliation, so we were going to work with non-Indigenous and Indigenous artists, and it really felt, there was a spark that happened, I think, from that moment.
I do want to ask you, though, about that choice to do it as a ballet, because as we suggested in the intro, ballet is not necessarily the first go-to medium or art form that you would use to tell a contemporary story, and particularly one with this subject matter.
Right.
So why go there?
Well, it's interesting because one of the dynamics that we really explored through our partnership with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was this idea of reconciliation. What is reconciliation? How does it happen? And I think that this idea, which I have to say Andre Lewis and Jeff Hurd at the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, right from the get-go, when it just had, through my own past associations with, people that are involved with the TRC, I had seen that they had really wanted to look at commemoration projects and largely in art projects. And so the one day, just the thought occurred to me, like maybe this is the project. So I approached Jeff and Andre, and they agreed instantly. I think that we felt that it was the perfect opportunity for reconciliation. So using a Western art form, exploring an Indigenous story, reality for our country. And, and then when we kind of often had many conversations with people about the fit, I said, well, look at Romeo and Juliet. I mean, it's about suicide. Really, if we want to boil it down to an issue, so we really tried to not do that with this. We tried to approach it as, this is not an issue story. This is not a didactic piece of work. This is a story, and let's just bring that story to life. And
let me ask you about another interesting choice that you all made, and that is, of course, there are Indigenous performers in this production, but there are also non-Indigenous performers in this production, aren't there?
There are. So again, in the spirit of reconciliation, it was a project that the RWB, as a company, was going to be doing with Indigenous and non-Indigenous creators.
I'm trying to figure out if that was controversial to include non-Indigenous in the production.
Well, it was the company. So the company, there are no Indigenous dancers in the company. So yes, could we have said we wanted to have our lead dancers as Indigenous dancers? We could have, but we didn't because we felt that the Royal Winnipeg Ballet had committed itself to doing a new creation. And so they, as a company, were working with Indigenous artists to create this new creation. And we felt that process was really a process of reconciliation. So our dancers worked with elders, our dancers worked with ceremonial people, our dancers worked with survivors, and really it was a process which was so fulsome, and it included all the staff at the RWB, and it included the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and those that have been there as advisory members. They came to work with our dancers and our staff. So it was a long process. It was 2 years. We did feast the project. We blessed the project. We had opportunity for the dancers to come to ceremony, and they all did, and it was a wonderful experience with our elders. So it was, again, we really saw it as a process of reconciliation that was a story that is, part of Canada's history, It is an Indigenous story at its core, but it was a project that a non-Native company wanted to take on.
And how have the variety of Indigenous communities across the country reacted to all of the choices you've made in the production itself so far?
I have to say that, in the production, we also worked the score. Our score includes, the music and voice of Tanya Tegak, and also Steve Wood of Northern Cree drum singers. And so we were incredible. Those were the top performers. They're internationally renowned performers that came and worked with our our composer. So this project was one that we found was not only we were creating for the survivors, but it was part of our own stories too. So when the project opened, we weren't certain about how people would respond, whether Canadians or Indigenous or non-Indigenous people would respond. And we were deeply embraced by the Aboriginal community in Winnipeg. And we had supports there for survivors that were at the performances. We sold out. We were critically acclaimed.
Taking it on the road?
And so now it's on the road, yes.
Now it's on the road.
So it surpassed. We have said that, our reconciliation project made us greater than we could have imagined. I think that that's how we really, truly feel about the piece.
There are, of course, so many different paths to reconciliation.
Yes.
But you don't necessarily, again, think top of mind art is a way to get there. Do you think art is a useful path towards reconciliation?
I do. I think that it's interesting because the Truth and Reconciliation Commission also thought so. They were deeply invested in commemoration projects. And now, as the commission is wrapped up, we really see that this opportunity that we had at the Royal Winnipeg Ballet to work with, Indigenous artists from Canada that were just brilliant, and to bring them in and to have them work with Mark and Christos was a really, really incredible idea. And we wouldn't have thought of it had the TRC not been there. It wasn't a story that we would have explored. So yes, I think largely people would have expected, a fusion project or a project where we collaborate with another, Indigenous dance company. And those are all possibilities. But for this project with the TRC, we had made decisions in partnership with the chair and commissioners and their advisory group.
So when people see the program, when they see the production, what would you like them to leave the theater thinking?
I do know that, this idea that that people feel somehow personally attached to the story because this is still happening in Canada, or this is what's unraveling in Canada, the truth and this reconciliation process. But if we can remove ourselves from that sort of personal relationship to the story, I think that, what remains is that we did create a great project, and the collaboration between Indigenous artists and non-Indigenous artists was just brilliant in this case.
Great. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Continued success, I should say.
Thank you.
Better. Tina Keeper, Associate Producer, Going Home Star. Thanks so much.
Great.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.